I always knew my parents favored my younger sister. What I didn't know was that they would somehow turn my wedding into her latest social media project. My fiancée and I had spent nearly a year planning a simple ceremony. Nothing extravagant. Just close friends, family, good food, and a celebration of the fact that a human man and an alien woman from opposite sides of the galaxy had somehow fallen hopelessly in love. That should have been enough. Apparently it wasn't. 3 weeks before the wedding, my sister burst into my apartment carrying a tablet and the kind of smile usually seen on people about to commit financial crimes. "I have amazing news," she announced. My fiancé, sitting beside me on the couch, immediately whispered, "That is not the face of someone bringing amazing news." I should have listened. My sister threw herself into a chair and started swiping through presentation slides. There were charts. There were diagrams. There was a projected hashtag. There was even a pie chart labeled "Potential Viral Reach." "What am I looking at?" I asked. "My birthday party." I blinked. "Your birthday is 2 months away." "Not anymore." That was when my parents walked into the room. Whenever my parents entered together wearing matching smiles, disaster usually followed. My father cleared his throat. "We've made a family decision." I immediately hated those words. My mother nodded enthusiastically. "Since your wedding venue is already booked and paid for, we've decided to combine your wedding with your sister's birthday celebration." I stared at them. My fiancé stared at them. Even the robotic vacuum cleaner stopped moving as if it wanted to hear the explanation. "You've decided what?" "It makes perfect sense," my mother said. "One event. One venue. One budget." My sister grinned. "Think of the exposure." "I don't need exposure," I replied. "I'm getting married, not launching a breakfast cereal." My sister ignored me. She continued clicking through slides. The first image displayed a giant stage. The second showed fireworks. The third featured a 30-foot holographic projection of her face rotating above the dance floor. I looked at the estimated cost. Then I looked again because I assumed I had misplaced the decimal point. I hadn't. "Who is paying for all this?" The room became suspiciously quiet. Then all three of them looked directly at me. I nearly choked. "Absolutely not." My father sighed dramatically. "You're already spending money on a wedding." "Yes." "So it's basically the same thing." "No, it isn't." My sister rolled her eyes. "You're being selfish." "Selfish." The woman who wanted thousands of guests to scan a QR code leading to her social media channels was calling me selfish. The next week somehow got worse. Every wedding decoration started disappearing. The elegant floral arrangements became giant displays promoting my sister's accounts. The welcome banner no longer said congratulations. Instead it said follow for daily content. My fiancé found customized shirts stacked near the entrance. Each shirt had my sister's face printed across the front. One of them even included the phrase future viral legend. My fiancée stared at the shirt for several seconds. Then she calmly asked, "Is this considered normal human behavior?" "Not by healthy humans." The final straw came when I visited the venue. The wedding stage had been reduced to a tiny platform in the corner. Meanwhile, my sister's birthday stage dominated the entire hall. It featured professional lighting, giant screens, confetti launchers, and enough equipment to communicate with alien civilizations. Ironically, my fiancé actually belonged to an alien civilization and was less demanding than my sister. Standing there, looking at what should have been our wedding, I realized something important. Nobody cared about the marriage. Nobody cared about the vows. Nobody cared about the future my fiancé and I were building together. To my parents, the wedding had become a funding source. To my sister, it had become content. I glanced at my fiancé. She squeezed my hand and smiled. That smile reminded me exactly why I was marrying her. And at that moment, I made a decision. If they wanted a circus, they could have it. But they weren't getting my wedding. The strange thing about reaching your breaking point is how peaceful everything becomes afterward. The moment I decided my family wasn't getting my wedding, all the frustration disappeared. In its place came clarity. The following evening, my fiancée and I sat on the balcony of our apartment overlooking the city lights. The summer air was warm, and somewhere above us a transport shuttle crossed the stars. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder. "What do you actually want?" she asked. Not what my parents wanted. Not what my sister wanted. What I wanted. The answer came surprisingly fast. "I want to marry you." She laughed softly. "That's good. It would make the rest of this relationship very awkward otherwise." I smiled for the first time in days. "I mean, I want to marry you without giant holograms of my sister floating overhead." "An excellent goal. Without influencers." "Even better. Without hashtags." She squeezed my hand. "Now we're talking." For a while we sat quietly. Then she pointed toward the eastern horizon. "Remember our first date?" Of course I remembered. We had met during an interspecies cultural exchange program. While everyone else attended speeches and networking events, we had skipped out before sunrise and watched the dawn from a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was still one of my favorite memories. "We watched the sunrise together," I said. She nodded. "And it was perfect." That was when the idea hit us both. We looked at each other. Neither of us needed to say it. A sunrise wedding. Small. Private. Real. Ours. The next morning we started making calls. Fortunately, my parents had been so busy spending money on my sister's influencer empire that they hadn't noticed I still controlled a large portion of the wedding budget. Before anyone could touch it, I transferred the remaining funds into a separate account. Then we quietly canceled several unnecessary bookings. The amount we recovered was enough. Not enough for giant celebrity DJs and holographic birthday castles. But enough for something meaningful. Within 48 hours we found a beautiful coastal location overlooking the ocean. The ceremony would take place just before sunrise. Only a handful of guests would be invited. People who actually cared about us. People who wanted to witness a marriage rather than a social media campaign. When my grandmother received her invitation, she called me immediately. "I knew you'd finally snap. Was it that obvious? Your sister once tried to livestream a funeral." "Fair point." Grandma laughed. Then her voice softened. "You deserve your own wedding." For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely supported. Meanwhile, my family remained completely distracted. Every day brought a new disaster. My sister became obsessed with rehearsing a dance routine involving backup dancers dressed as planets orbiting around her. Apparently she was the sun. Everyone else was expected to revolve around her. Honestly, it was the most accurate thing she had ever said. My parents spent hours arguing about camera angles and sponsorship opportunities. Nobody asked about the wedding. Nobody asked about me. Nobody even noticed I had stopped participating in the planning meetings. My fiancée found the entire situation hilarious. One evening she walked into the living room carrying a tablet. "You need to see this." It was a video my sister had posted. She was explaining to her followers why her birthday celebration would be the most important event of the year. Not the most important birthday. The most important event. On the planet. My fiancée stared at the screen. Then she looked at me. "In my culture, saying something like that starts a war." I nearly fell off the couch laughing. As the days passed, our secret plans continued coming together. Friends confirmed attendance. Reservations were finalized. The sunrise forecast looked perfect. Everything felt simple and peaceful. Exactly what a wedding should feel like. The night before the ceremony, my phone exploded with messages from my parents demanding approval for additional party expenses. I ignored every single one. Instead, I spent the evening with the woman I loved. We walked along the shoreline. Talked about our future. Talked about the home we wanted to build. Talked about children someday. Talked about everything that actually mattered. Near midnight we returned to our hotel overlooking the ocean. Neither of us slept much. Partly from excitement. partly because tomorrow would change our lives forever. A few hours later, we climbed into a vehicle and headed toward the ceremony site. The world was still dark. The stars shimmered overhead. The ocean rolled gently against the shore. As we arrived, a faint golden glow began appearing along the horizon. My fiancée slipped her hand into mine. For the first time since this whole disaster began, I felt completely at peace. The circus was still waiting back at the city. But here, standing beside the woman I loved as dawn approached, none of that mattered anymore. The horizon slowly transformed from black to deep blue, then to shades of gold and orange that painted the ocean with liquid fire. Everything felt quiet, peaceful, real. The small group of friends and family we had invited stood nearby, smiling warmly. There were no giant screens, no sponsorship banners, no influencers demanding retakes. Just people who genuinely cared about us. My grandmother sat in the front row wearing the proudest smile I had ever seen. She caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. Classy as always. As the first edge of the sun appeared above the water, the ceremony began. My fiancée looked absolutely breathtaking. The golden light reflected from her silver eyes, making them seem almost luminous. For a moment I forgot everyone else existed. I forgot my parents. I forgot my sister. I forgot the entire disaster waiting back in the city. All I could see was the woman who had chosen me. The woman who had crossed entire star systems, and somehow fallen in love with an ordinary human man. When it came time for our vows, neither of us bothered reading from prepared notes. We simply spoke from the heart. I told her how she made every difficult day easier. How she could make me laugh even when I was furious. How every future I imagined included her. She laughed through tears and admitted she had originally thought humans were completely insane. To be fair, I whispered, recent events support that theory. The guests burst out laughing. Then she told everyone that despite humanity's flaws, she had found one human worth keeping. That earned even louder applause. At that exact moment, an unexpected voice spoke from behind the crowd. I have to admit, this is the most romantic thing I've seen all year. Everyone turned. Several guests immediately gasped. One person nearly dropped their phone. Standing near the edge of the beach was one of the most famous celebrities on the planet. Apparently the celebrity had been staying at a private resort nearby and had gone for an early morning walk. The gathering had caught their attention. Curious, they had stopped to watch. My grandmother leaned toward me. Either I'm hallucinating or someone very famous is standing behind me. I blinked twice. Nope. That's definitely real. The celebrity laughed and approached. After hearing a brief explanation of why we had moved our wedding to sunrise, they looked genuinely amused. Wait. Your family turned your wedding into your sister's birthday content event? Unfortunately. And she made you pay for it? That was the plan. The celebrities shook their head. That's incredible. Incredible good or incredible bad? Both. Everyone laughed. To our complete surprise, the celebrity asked if they could stay for the rest of the ceremony. A few minutes later they were sitting beside my grandmother, chatting like old friends. The wedding continued. Photos were taken. Champagne was opened. Breakfast was served. The celebrity joined every activity. Then things became truly ridiculous. Without telling anyone, they posted several photos and videos online. One picture showed my bride and me standing together, as the sunrise illuminated the ocean behind us. Another included a caption describing the story of the wedding that escaped becoming an influencer circus. The internet reacted instantly. Within an hour the post had millions of views. Comments flooded every platform. People loved the story. They loved the sunrise setting. They loved the romance. Most of all, they loved the fact that we had chosen genuine happiness over attention. Meanwhile, back at the original venue, absolute chaos was beginning. Several guests arrived expecting a wedding. Instead, they found giant posters of my sister. They found branded merchandise. They found dancers rehearsing social media trends. And eventually they discovered one very important detail. The bride and groom weren't there. At first, nobody believed it. Then someone found the celebrity's viral post. Within minutes, phones were appearing everywhere. Guests started watching videos from our ceremony. Some laughed. Some cheered. Many immediately decided they preferred our wedding. Attendance at my sister's party began shrinking fast. Guests weren't interested in watching influencer content. They were busy sharing clips of a real love story. As the morning continued, the internet started comparing both events side by side. One featured a beautiful sunrise wedding celebrating love. The other featured my sister standing beneath a giant holographic version of her own face. The comments were absolutely merciless. And the day was only getting started. By lunchtime, our wedding had become the biggest feel-good story on the internet. Neither of us had planned for that. We certainly hadn't planned on a celebrity accidentally becoming our unofficial wedding ambassador. Yet somehow millions of people were now watching clips of our ceremony. News programs discussed the story. Talk shows mentioned it. Online commentators praised the decision to walk away from family manipulation and focus on what actually mattered. Meanwhile, my sister's birthday event was experiencing a very different kind of fame. The internet had discovered the giant hologram. Unfortunately for her, people found it hilarious. Memes appeared everywhere. Someone edited the hologram into orbit around several planets. Someone else compared it to an alien invasion. My personal favorite showed the hologram replacing a moon over a city skyline. The caption read, "The ego has landed." Even my bride laughed at that one. The situation became even worse when videos from the party started circulating. Guests could be seen leaving. Tables sat half empty. Several attendees were openly watching clips from our sunrise ceremony on their phones. One particularly unfortunate video showed my sister demanding that everyone stop talking about the wedding and focus on her content. That clip alone generated millions of views. As for my parents, they spent most of the day dealing with confused vendors, angry guests, and public embarrassment. Apparently, several people had discovered exactly how the wedding budget had been redirected. Public sympathy was not on their side. For the first time in years, they were being forced to face the consequences of their favoritism. A few days later, they requested a meeting. My bride and I agreed. The conversation was awkward from the very beginning. My parents looked exhausted. My sister looked like someone had personally offended her by allowing other people to exist. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then my father sighed. "I think we made some mistakes." My grandmother, who had insisted on attending the meeting, nearly choked on her coffee. "Some mistakes?" she repeated. The room became very quiet. My mother apologized. Not perfectly. Not completely. But it was more accountability than I had heard in years. My sister, however, remained committed to being herself. "This wouldn't have happened if people had supported my brand." My bride leaned toward me. "Can I say something?" I nodded. She smiled politely at my sister. "In my civilization, entire governments have collapsed with less arrogance." I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. Even my grandmother started wheezing. My sister did not appreciate the observation. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Honestly, I didn't care. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. The internet had already handled that. The public humiliation. The memes. The criticism. None of it brought me happiness. What made me happy was much simpler. I was married. I had the woman I loved beside me. Everything else was background noise. A week later, we left for our honeymoon. Far away from social media. Far away from family drama. Far away from giant holograms. The destination was a beautiful coastal world known for its endless beaches and spectacular sunrises. On our first morning there, we woke before dawn and walked hand in hand toward the shore. The ocean stretched endlessly before us. The sky slowly brightened. A familiar golden glow appeared along the horizon. My wife rested her head against my shoulder. "You know," she said, "when I first arrived on Earth, everyone warned me that human relationships were complicated. They were right. They forgot to mention human families. I laughed. Fair. She smiled. Interspecies diplomacy is easier than dealing with your sister. Also fair. For a few minutes we stood together in comfortable silence. The sun finally rose above the water, filling the world with light. Almost exactly like it had on our wedding day. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She slipped her hand into mine. And as I looked at the sunrise beside the woman I loved, I realized something important. My parents had tried to turn our wedding into someone else's celebration. My sister had tried to make herself the center of everything. But in the end, none of them had won. The attention faded. The memes eventually disappeared. The headlines moved on. What remained was the only thing that had ever mattered. A real marriage. A real future. And the certainty that the best revenge was never making someone else lose. It was building a life so happy that winning stopped being important. Then my wife pointed toward the horizon and smiled. Let's make sure your sister never plans our anniversary. I laughed. And together we walked into the sunrise.